I want to continue a little bit with our dog and pony about the design center, but I don't want to bore you all. So some input would be good. Some input would be
Were we going to talk
good.
about the calibration?
Huh?
Didn't we ever talk we were going to do like a calibration design?
Oh, I forgot about that.
Oh, okay. But yeah.
What he's referring to is last week we talked about, especially with the Dream Machines, how
Okay, give me
to
a
how to
second.
test the settings that you really liked, and then save them, write them down somewhere so you could reuse them. Settings for like the running stitch. I think the machine calls it a pitch. What setting to pitch do you want? We talked about the satin stitch, whether you wanted it tight together or looser. How wide do you want it? Do you want it wider, like a 4 millimeter, or skinnier, like a 2 millimeter? Those are all decisions that you have to make. And Brent had what I thought was a good idea, because once in a while he does. He said, "Hey, how about we hoop something up, and then we take one shape and we redo the pitch and we redo the settings." And like 4 or 5 different ways, and then we stitch that out, and you can actually mark on there which one that is, and you can set that aside, and you have a little library of stitches that you might like or stitches you don't like.
So what I wanted to, me and Becky talked about last week.
Jeez, I forgot all about this. I keep going.
Well, I thought it would be good to cover this now.
Yes, it fits in nicely now.
Because as we're playing with Design Center, we were talking about some of the settings on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up our Design Center. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to
Use a
grab
built-in shape.
I'm just going to grab a built-in shape. For the stitch I'm going to do, I'm probably going to just use a circle, because I think a circle is a nice,
Good test.
good test. And plus you can check a few other things, but we're just going to do a circle. And I don't want it that big at all, because I don't need it that big. And I've got a 5x7 hoop in here. So what I want to do
One
is
and a half.
yeah,
Close
I'm just going up here, and I've got a 5x7. If you had a bigger hoop, you could certainly make this bigger. But because we've got a 5x7, I was just gonna. And this actually doesn't account for any machine that has smaller hoops, because it's a Design Center thing.
That's right. And if you need a machine with a design center, come on in, because we have a great used Dream Machine.
Yes, we do.
available. We have great financing on all the new ones.
Oh, we do. Yes, indeed.
Stellaires and Luminaires.
So I've created a 1.5-inch circle, and I'm going to hit OK. And all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to copy that circle, or I could bring a new one in. If I go to size, that'll give me the move option. And all I'm going to do...
Are you still in Design Center,
I'm
Brent?
still in Design Center, yes. And I'm just going to do that, and then I'm going to copy that shape again. And all I'm doing is I'm going to make 4 of them. And you
He's
could make...
just making lots of circles.
Yes, and I'm making them all the same size so I can see what it looks like.
And they're coming in as shapes that have nothing assigned to them yet.
Yep,
This is
nothing.
different than when we scan stuff
Yep.
in. When we scanned it in, it automatically had a stitch line associated with it.
I'm hoping I spaced that right, that this will all fit.
I think so.
Oh, wait, you know what I can do? Is if I change my...
Now he's getting fancy. He's going into settings.
I'm going over here, and all I'm going to do is change this to a 5x...
For those of you who aren't aware, when he changes that in settings, it's just a visual thing on the
Yes.
screen. It does nothing with what this machine knows is on here.
Yes.
It's visualization
All it
only.
has done is gave me this 5x7 outline, so that I know as long as my shapes are within that outline,
Yeah.
it'll fit in my hoop.
It's
And
handy.
I may have
It's handy.
I may have put those a little too close, but you'll get the
No,
idea.
they'll be fine.
So basically now, if you look up here, what we're going to do is I want to check my satin stitch width, because I told you that that's a little bit different on all of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure we have a satin stitch, and then I'm going to do a line fill, which is this here, and assign a satin stitch. Well, they already have it. Those are all already satin stitches.
Why?
Because that's what the
It was
setting.
to fit.
That's what I had.
So it did assign on
Yeah,
that.
when
I
it
just
came in.
told you a lie.
So when it came in, it assigned it the satin stitch
Oh,
here.
I didn't know it did that when you first created it. So
Yep.
you did.
Yeah,
Okay.
whatever. Yep.
So it's assigned, but we don't know how wide it is.
Yes, so
or
now
how
we're-
close together it is.
So and you don't need to use circles. You can use anything else. We're going to use circles. So I'm going to hit next now. And here are my circles.
Now, those are all your circles.
Those are all my circles. So you'll notice I've got a red box around this one. What I am going to do here.
Before you do that, can you explain that little link button? Because a lot of people forget what that's
Yes. Okay, so if I hit this link button, see how they're all linked?
for. Now, whatever change I
So-
make goes to all of them.
All of them. So if I change my
Turn
my
it
width,
off if you want to.
yeah, for what we're doing, you don't want it linked because what we are going to do is we're going to leave that one at a 0.08 pitch.
Which is sort of like the
That
length of this.
Yeah.
How far the stitches are apart.
yeah, it's kind of the stitch width.
No, it's not density. So I don't know what that is.
It's
See,
going to be how wide it is.
It's how wide it is.
Yes.
On a zigzag.
On your
Okay.
set, how wide your satin stitch
Okay,
is. So
all
now
right.
I'm going to move this up.
I can't do this in inches. I always have to be in metric.
Well, these are in metric.
Oh,
Oh,
I
these
don't
are.
have
Do you
my
want
glasses on.
Oh yeah, these are in inches. We could do it to metric if you
No,
want.
it's all right. I'm just
So,
saying
all
I
I've-
like
all
to
of-
do it in metric because the
Yeah.
rest of the world does embroidery in
Mm-hmm.
metric.
And so I've just upped that by 2 clicks. So I'm at 0.12 for my second one. I'm going to hit OK. And you're going to see it got a little bit thicker. I'm going to come over here to that one. And I'm going to put this one up to 0.16. And I'm going to take this one here. We'll put that up to point.
Anybody get lost yet?
Okay. So what we're doing is we're making is a calibration type thing. So you can see when you put these things into your machine, this number is really hard to like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to put a stitch to that number. So this is going to be 0.2. This one's 0.16,
What about the other one?
0.112,
Okay.
and that's the
You're
default.
leaving the other one at 100% right now?
Yeah, I'm leaving them all. I'm gonna, that's going to be your density. That would be another one. When you do this, I would recommend doing one setting at a time. Because if you start doing multiple settings, you won't be able to look at what you've printed, what you've stitched out, and say, "This is what I'm looking for."
Okay.
So what I've just done, you can repeat this process with your different settings. But I would say, and I could get 6. I could put 6 circles on here if I wanted to. I'm just going to do 4 to kind of show you what we're doing.
Okay.
0.08,
Yeah.
0.12, 0.16, and 0.20. I'm going to hit set.
We should see.
And you can
A
see,
difference.
yeah, and you can see on the screen there a little bit how they're a little bit different. And that on the Dream Machine, you won't get that until you get to this screen here.
So come on in and get a brand new Lumi 2.
And the reason we're doing this, and what we're going to do now is we're just going to embroider this, and it shouldn't take but a minute. Well, it says it's going to take 5 minutes, but
Yeah,
whatever.
no, I got rid of my long arm. I like my Lumi so much.
So what we're going to do is now we're going to stitch that out. So I
right.
would recommend for you checking your satin stitches, a circle is a good way to go. If you want to check your running
Can we
stitches,
see that? Can we get in on that? While it's stitching, I want to say something about the density. It's 0%.
Right now it's at
That's-
100%,
that's
yes.
I'm sorry, 100%. That's so when you change that, you go plus or minus to that 100. So if you minus from
These
it,
screens?
they're going to get further apart.
Yes.
If you go plus, it gets closer together. That's how that little adjustment works. So this is sort of what he thinks is the baseline for
Yes.
a satin stitch density.
yes, the machine is going to see this as baseline satin stitch. Now, what's important, now this actual technique, the first time I saw this done was actually Superior Thread recommends doing this with all your thread.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. Well, it does make a big difference on the width of your thread.
You take a thread and you actually do this for tension. So you
Oh.
start at 0 tension, do a couple stitches, move
see
it up,
if you've got
yeah,
any-
and keep moving it up, and then you look at it and to see where your
Interesting.
tension looks best.
Where's my glasses? I gotta put my glasses on and check your tension because you got a dark thread on top and
Yeah.
you got a white bobbin.
Yeah,
So that's
but
coming out pretty.
yeah, but
pretty
like I said,
good.
this is for regular sewings where I've seen this done 1st.
Mm-hmm.
But for what we're doing, you've got all these settings and you don't really know what they're doing. It's like a 0.08. What does that really mean? So what we're going to have now is when we get this done, we can write on this sample our different numbers, so we know exactly what that setting is going to look
the
like.
width of that
Yes.
satin stitch. And you can do the same thing with any of the other stitches
and
that are in there.
yes, any of the other settings. I would definitely do this with a running stitch as well,
Yeah.
and change your pitch, because that's going to be your stitch length, and find which one you like, and then go through and do this again with density, and all you're going to do is, after this gets stitched out, we're going to take a Sharpie and just write in the center of the circle what the setting is. And then
No, I actually did something similar to this when I was figuring out my stippling settings.
yes,
Because you can't really get a feel for it until you make a couple different designs with altering your pitch,
yes.
altering, I don't know, there's another setting in stippling. And it makes a huge difference.
But I would, like I said, when I do this, I would only do one setting at a time for your test stitch out.
I did.
Because if I was to alter the width and the density on
You would get confused.
well, not only that, then when I looked at it, I would be like, well, what's the setting that I'm trying to change? Because you wouldn't know, because you've changed too many variables.
The first thing is you'd say, okay, what is my
Yeah.
what is my, now see that one,
See, this is our
puckering.
Yeah, it's because I didn't do a fantastic job hooping because I was in a hurry. You also, when you do this, want to make sure that you have some stabilizer on the back, because that will affect how that satin stitch looks. You could throw some. You could just do this on just straight stabilizer without any fabric, but I would recommend.
It's interesting that the wider stitch required more stabilization than the narrow stitch.
Yeah, that might be something to pick up, is when you'll see stuff like that. Like I said, I didn't do a fantastic job hooping.
Yeah, but still, I see a definite difference in
Yeah.
the,
So there, the
stabilization.
things like that is stuff you might pick up. But you can even see on the screen now. You can see the difference in the width of those, and they all started out as the same circle. So what I would say is, when you're working in Design Center, this would be a very good exercise just to get comfortable punching the buttons on the screen. But it's also a very good reference, because now you know what those numbers mean. You've got a
Right.
visualization.
And then you kind of as a applique person, you kind of fall into what size satin stitch you really like.
Yeah.
You know, and this helps you determine what.
Yeah,
that
and
is.
you might find when you're doing an applique, say for example, you're going to do a leaf.
Yeah.
You're going to want a wider satin stitch around the edge, but say you wanted to stitch the veins into the leaf, you would want a narrower satin stitch, and then this would give you an idea. Now, we went up 2 jumps every time, so
Yeah.
there are some sizes in between that you.
Yeah.
And like I said, if I was really going to do this to have as a reference in my sewing room, I probably would have used like the 9.5 by 14 and laid out like 6 or 8 of these, and then did every increment, so that you can have a really good. I mean, if you really wanted to go hardcore, I think.
That would be really cool.
Yeah, but I think these 4 here give you a really good place to start.
When it applies the satin stitch, is it doing it 50% in, 50% out? Do you know? On the outer edge of that circle, like you have a circle with a
Yep.
definite edge to it. When it applies
Oh, I see what you're
the
saying.
width, is it evenly just
Space.
space between inside and outside edges of that circle?
I
I'm just
believe
curious.
so. I don't know
Like,
for
did
sure.
my inside shrink a little as we got wider? I think it did.
Yeah, and when you could get some calipers out, I suppose, and really figure
Yeah.
that out.
I'm just wondering, because I know, like, if you use software, you get
Yeah.
to make it.
To decide which
You
direction
get
it
to
goes. Yeah.
decide, but I think it looks like 50-50 is.
So all I would do
where
at this
it went.
point is I would take my pen. Sharpie probably works better, but I've got a pen right here, so I'm just going to use a pen, and I am just going to write in the middle point.
Don't use friction.
0.08. This
And
one's
iron it
point-
off.
Yeah, and iron it off. So now, if
This is the width of those satin stitches.
yes, this is the satin stitch setting. So now if you zoom in again, you can see I've added my calibrations to it. So I now know.
If you wanted to be really fancy, you could have put text in and
Oh yeah, you could do it with the text too. You could have actually.
take too long.
Yeah.
But
You could stitch it in and say, yeah, I mean, if you really wanted to. We were just doing a quick, I mean, you could really have some fun and make these really cool looking, an entire book
Yeah.
of different settings. But this is, I just
I'd
wanted,
rather make a real something.
yeah. But I just wanted to show this idea to people, because this is a really good way, if you're going to be doing a lot in your
Yeah.
in your design center, to know what those settings look like on fabric. Because what it looks like on screen, like I said, on the Dream Machine, you're not going to get a lot of this on-screen information in the design aspect of it.
It's
you're just
all
going
to look the same.
Yeah, it's just going to be a line.
On screen,
Yeah.
this one's going to look the same in the design
Yes.
center as this
The
one does
yeah.
on the Dream Machine.
On the Dream Machine. The Luminaire.
Which is why upgrading to the Luminaire
Yeah.
is a good
the
idea.
the Luminaire and the Stellaire software.
I should have made the quiz how many times did I try to sell you a Luminaire?
The Luminaire and the Stellaire will actually give you an on-screen what it looks like, but I don't think it's a substitute for actually seeing it on fabric to really get an
Yeah.
idea, because this, you wouldn't know that.
And at 100%, those are pretty tight.
Yeah, and so that would be the next setting that I would do is I would take one of these, say like for example the 2-inch one, leave all of them at that setting, and then change the density so that I can see what different density
What
looks
thread
like.
do we have in there? It's a Floriani.
Floriani 40 weight.
40 weight.
Yeah.
So what I would say is that 100% is tied pretty closely to
Oh
the
yeah,
40
for sure.
weight.
Oh yeah, the weight of your thread is 40 weight is your typical thread, so that's why at 100% it should look all right. But 50 weight at 100% is going to look a little sparse. So this would be another thing you could do is stitch it out with different densities, but leaving all the other settings the same, and then do that same stitch out with different threads. And then you'll have a reference of what things look like. Because I think it's very important when you start getting into the design work is you've got all these settings, but you want to know what they look like.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you'll end up
And you
like what?
start going,
Yeah, like is this the right setting? And
That's why they call it pitch.
Yeah.
Because in this case, it's the width of the stitch.
yeah,
But on a running stitch, well, I guess it's still the
Yeah.
width of the stitch, but in my brain, that's not the width of the stitch, that's the length of
Yeah.
the stitch. So the pitch depends on,
yeah.
interesting.
And what's nice about Design Center, because if you do this for software, you've got a million different settings. But you could actually do this printout for most of your, do the stitch out for most of your different settings on Design Center so that you will have a reference of what the different settings are going to do and how they're going to affect. I like circles. I think circles do a great job of just kind of giving you a good idea, and it gives you that spot in the middle where you can label it. Squares are pretty good too if you want to get a look for like corners and stuff, but I prefer circles. They just give a nice representation, I think, of what the stitch is going to look like at all angles.
Then buy a giant binder.
Yeah,
Yes, you can. You're doing it, Deanna. Yay, she is.
Yeah.
She is listening and texting.
Yeah.
It's actually chatting.
Yeah, and if you do, and if you,
Deanna.
all you have to do
Chatting.
is after you do this up, if you hit it with some,
I called it texting too.
yeah, if you hit this with some Tarot Magic or whatnot before, it'll be nice and stiff. Trim it up, put it in a sleeve protector, and throw it in a binder like Deanna says, and then you can just flip to see what the different settings are. But I thought this would be good to cover now because as we get into this applique that we're doing, some of these settings are like, well, what are they going to look like?
Right.
And so by calibrating your machine, or not calibrating, but stitching this out, you will know how that setting is going to affect your design.
Well, and the other thing is, and I'm going to talk about one of the things on here are stems, and I think I mentioned you can either do it as an embroidery or you could cut it out. And this is the tiny stem. You may choose not to cut it out of fabric on your applique design,
Yeah.
and you may choose to just assign a wide satin stitch to it.
Yep. And
So that helps you determine that.
And
too.
I would also recommend, if you are going to do this, go a little bit bigger than this 2.0. See how big you can get before it looks crappy. Because you can go too wide on the satin stitch, and it would be very good for you to know how wide that is.
When it gets wider, is it still a single stitch? It's just a
Yep.
big
Yeah, there's no
looping
bridge. Yep.
single stitch?
Mhm.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's not, like I said.
So it doesn't automatically say, oh, this is too wide.
Yeah,
I
it won't
should
do
put
that, yeah.
something in between.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's there's probably some limitations there, but there's things like that because of the limitations of the software. I would say just, like I said, try it for all the settings.
You know, if you did a wide satin stitch
Mm-hmm.
and you did a running stitch on top of the wide satin
Mhm.
stitch, you would have fringe.
Yeah.
Because you could just remove the
Remove it,
first bobbin or wash away that first stitching.
Yeah.
You'd have fringe. You'd have a fringy flower.
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
We're
You
gonna have
can
to
do
explore
it.
this,
You
yes.
can do it.
But yeah, so like I said, the idea was do this for all your settings. We just did it with the width. You can do this for your pitch, like the length for your running stitch. You could also do this to adjust your density.
Mm-hmm.
I would just recommend this in a couple different settings that you think you're going to use a lot of, just to get an idea what it's going to look like. And that's
Betty
all I wanted to
didn't tell
cover.
us it was time.
All right. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Shenanigans. Like, subscribe, and all that. But so
my
on,
God.
and be excellent to each other.
Toodles! Oh my God, you did make me hurt.